Welcome to the Sharpe Way Show. It is 7 p.m. on the East Coast. Yes, I'm here, Larry Sharpe, host of the Sharpe Way Show. So happy to have you here this evening. By the way, if you are around later on, around 8 p.m. Eastern tonight, and if you have an iPhone, you can jump on the Clubhouse. Clubhouse room is open at 8 p.m. ET. Connect, look for Larry Sharpe. I will be there talking about New York City lockdowns, good, bad, or something else. Tell me what you feel. Talk directly to me tonight, 8 p.m. Eastern. But before that, do me a favor, like, comment, share. I could use you to like, comment, share. Let people know we are out here doing this. Let people know that we are trying to make something happen in this country. We got a little bit of media, blackout, a little bit of a media lockdown. So you know what? Comment, share, like, get those algorithms going. We need them absolutely. And of course, if you got some cash, support the show, patreon.com/sharpeway. Throw any cash you can throw at me. I'd appreciate it. You got some of those Trump bucks, some Biden bucks, those stolen bucks. Happy to pick those up. And as always, head over to theadvocates.org. It's free. The link is right here in the description. Click that, take the human respect test, pass it around with people, about 3 minutes, and you're done. Life is good. So I wanted to bring up something today because it is this month is the beginnings of Black History Month. And I think the issue, I wasn't really going to say much about it. I bring it up a little bit every month, but I brought it up this time because my daughter in school was, of course, learning about it. And as she learns about it, the number one thing she begins to learn about is slavery. That's a huge piece. And I get that. It's clearly the reason why most African Americans are here in America, right? Brought over here as slaves. Get it. 100% makes total sense. My question is, how much of that should be, and I mean should, I don't believe in having a rule or a law stating what you should or shouldn't learn, or what you need to or must learn, but how much should be based upon slavery? How much of that? Is that the key? Is that everything? Or is it about something else? Is it about the descendants of slaves? My worry about this is I remember as a small kid, maybe I was 12 or 13. I don't remember how old I was. I had a Jewish friend who was talking about Holocaust Remembrance Day. And I remember when talking to him, I said, that seems kind of morbid. That's how I thought of it, right? I was probably 12 years old. I thought that seems kind of morbid. Do you really want to be remembering the Holocaust? It seems so terrible. He's like, no. We have to remember it, right? Blah, blah, and talk about it never again and stuff like that. And I went, okay, I guess so. Obviously, not being Jewish, I didn't get it. And being a kid, I just didn't get it. So I said, okay, I guess that makes sense. Sure, okay. I said, but it feels almost like, and I'm saying this as a kid, so please don't be upset. This was me as an ignorant kid. I said, it feels almost like you're talking about being victims. It sounds bad. That was my response. And he was like, well, don't you talk about slavery? And I was like, so I guess I remember that from about 40 years ago or so. And I was thinking two kids talking about their background. And I thought, is that an issue? Is that a problem if you start using that and identifying or talking about one of the lowest points in your history, right? If you're Jewish, clearly the Holocaust was one of the lowest points in history. If you're African American, clearly slavery, one of the lowest points in history. Do you do that? At what point do you feel sorry for yourself or feel like a victim or project that on others? And at what point are you simply saying, no, look, this is history and we have to remember it and never let it happen again? And I think about Greeks. Why? Because I live in Astoria. My wife is of Greek descent. And many times you'll find Greeks be upset about the Turks when they occupied Greece. But Greeks in no way that I know of, and the Greeks that I know of, and if you're Greek and you think differently, please enlighten me. I'm happy to hear this. But I don't feel like Greeks, use that down part of their history to be like, well, you know what, this is who we are. We were dominated by Turks. I think the reverse. I think most Greeks that I know, at least, American Greeks, I don't know many Greeks. I don't know many Greeks from, who are actual Greek citizens. I don't know many of them. So this is obviously American Greeks. They're much more defining themselves, if they do, by the great parts of the Greek society, right? Philosophy and, democracy and things of that sort, right? That type of thing. And then I look back to that kid I was talking with when I was a kid. He also was very proud of things like, and he mentioned this, so this is why I say this. He also mentioned the raid on Entebbe, when the Israeli soldiers, those you don't know, who went and rescued a bunch of Israeli citizens who were being held captive in Uganda. He's very proud of that, right? And I thought, yeah, that makes sense. And I know many Jewish people were very proud of the Jewish resistance to Rome and Egypt and things like that. So I said, okay. So there's kind of this both sides piece, right? Americans as a whole, we're not, we don't talk about, well, we got our Capitol burned in 1812 and we got bombed in Pearl Harbor. We talk about, the wars that we won in D-Day and the moonwalk, right? By our more higher points. But except recently. And I say this recently because I think it fits both Americans and it also fits with, I think, maybe African Americans here. Recently, a lot of Americans have been defining ourselves by our down points, by our victim status. Many of us have. And I mean, as Americans as a whole, I don't mean this as African Americans specifically. I mean this as a whole. We're very much about, we got attacked on 9/11 and things like that. And we're not talking so much about the D-Day, or the moonwalk, right? That kind of thing isn't as prevalent, I feel. And again, I'm happy if you think I'm wrong. Tell me that I'm wrong. I feel that isn't as prevalent as it used to be. Maybe that's a good thing. But then I take this now to African American history, to Black History Month. Are we going to be, as Black Americans, are we going to be more defined by slavery or by our resilience of coming after slavery, right? I completely get why Jewish people would want to remember the Holocaust, clearly. But at the same time, they're going to talk about the raid on Entebbe or all the other good things that, people of Jewish descent have done. Makes sense, right? Same thing with Greeks, of course. I'm worried or concerned that with the current way that American culture has been going, is Black History Month only going to be about slavery, Jim Crow, and the war on drugs? Or is it going to be about overcoming slavery, overcoming Jim Crow, and overcoming the war on drugs? Do I mean that we shouldn't talk about those things? Of course we should. We should talk about it. Of course we should. We should accept that that's part of history. Yep, that happened. What are you going to do? But what makes any group, whether that's a racial group, an ethnic group, religious group, what makes any group worthy of respect is not how they've been hurt, but how they've overcome the pain, whatever that might be, right? And I would hope that in Black History Month, that people see it in a way that doesn't garner any sorrow or sympathy or pity. I don't want any of that. I don't. And I speak only for myself and my daughters, kind of, but only for myself, maybe my daughters. But I hope it garners respect. I hope that not only does it garner respect from people who aren't part of the African diaspora, but also it inspires self-respect from Black Americans. I hope it does. It does me, and I think my daughters too. If not, I'll just say they do. But I think it does too. I hope that it does. And I hope that we use that as Americans to just show yet another group of people who've had a very hard time in life and came to America and, some in chains, some not, but who came to America and were able to overcome. I hope we can focus on that without forgetting the bad, but I hope we can focus on what is inspirational to have a better future. So that was my point about Black History Month. I hope that made sense to you guys. Let me grab a couple of comments and about that. So there we go. Larry, hey, how are you? So glad to see you. Yes. How do I get into Clubhouse? Okay, for those of you who want to get into Clubhouse, someone will invite you. That's how that works. Clubhouse is a cool kids club. Sadly, but it is a cool kids club. You have to get invited. So you need to know someone who can invite you. I don't have any more invites left, so we have to get people to invite you. So tell your friends who've got it to invite you. That's how you get into Clubhouse. Yes. So what do you think of just not talking about it anymore, the Morgan Freeman approach. I'm not a fan of that. I mean, should we not? And I'll go back to the example I meant with Jewish people. Should we not talk about the Holocaust? I think we should. We should bring it up. I don't think we should define, and this is my opinion, I'm not Jewish, so my opinion only, and the Jewish population can take that for whatever they want. It is my opinion that we shouldn't define Jewish Americans by that, but it's part of their history. It's part of who they are. It's part of, what forms their culture. It's part of it, and we should talk about it. But I don't think we should define them by it, right? I think that's a part of what they came through. We should look at that, the respect of those who came from it and were able to move on and have a successful life, even imagining what they went through in that time frame. So that's what I think. I don't think we should not talk about it. I think nuance. I talk about nuance all the time. There's a nuance to slavery. We should talk about slavery. It existed. It affected us tremendously. So we should talk about it. And the thing that I want to bring about that is, for those people who came to America and had trouble or problems, or for the Jews of Europe who had those same horrible issues, right? Who they had it, they were still able to fall back upon their culture to look to it for strength, to look to it for all those types of things, right? African Americans didn't have that, right? We didn't have that because our culture was taken away from us, so we weren't able to go back and go, well, just like when our families were in Africa and we had this problem, then we solved it this way. We couldn't fall back to that. We were like, all we knew was slavery. All we knew was chains. It's a different, it does change how you think about life and how your culture grows. It definitely does change that. And in many ways, the culture of African Americans became almost like a poor culture because that's what we knew, being impoverished and in chains. So just change a bit. So I don't want to not talk about it. I just don't want to be defined by it, but I want people to understand, this is why some people are, I mean, why do you think, so many Jewish people are worried about anti-Semitism? Right? The Holocaust. Yeah. Makes sense, right? I get it. So I think that we do want to talk about it. And I do talk about it sometimes. I'm never afraid to talk about race. You guys know me well enough that I'm happy to have a conversation about it. I'm never unhappy to talk about slavery. I just bring it up when I think it's appropriate, right? That's my issue. I bring it up when I think it fits. It's Black History Month. I'll bring it up, right? But otherwise, I probably wouldn't. I bring it up when I think it's appropriate. We should, if we can't talk about this, then how do we get past it? If we can't talk about it, then how do we understand each other? I think we should. I'm not a fan of not talking about it. I am a fan of talking it, but just not making it the central part of my life or the central way of defining, Africans in general. But I brought up there's different parts of African Americans now in America. There's the African diaspora, which is basically people who've come from Africa, and then it's descendants of slaves. They're all part of the diaspora, which is basically people who come from Africa, but descendants of slaves are a little bit different. In that, say, if you came from Nigeria, right, or something like that, or even Barack Obama, whose family came from Kenya, while they are African Americans, clearly they aren't descendants of slaves. So I don't want to necessarily link everything to slavery, because I do have a group of African Americans who've come who aren't part of that legacy. I mean, they suffer the consequences of it still, right? Because our culture has advanced because of it. So they still suffer some of the consequences of it. But their culture didn't come directly from that, if that makes any sense. I hope that was clear. So April 24th, 1950 was the start of the Armenian genocide. Remember that, and your wife being Greek may honor it. Mostly Armenians and Assyrians were slaughtered. Yeah, right. Absolutely, right. If you're Armenian, do you just forget the genocide? Do you just forget it? I would hope Armenians, and again, I'm not Armenian, I would hope Armenians wouldn't want to be defined by it, like this is who we are the victims of this genocide. But I would hope you would, accept it as that's part of your culture. It's part of who you are. It's part of how your culture has evolved. It's part of why, it might be a part of why you've come to America. I mean, I don't know your specific story, but I do know of people who fled and came to America. Perhaps your family was one of them. So it may even be that. So yes, there we go. So, All right. There we go. She just says it. I'm sorry. Yep. Adrian, I should have read your next comment. Yes, remember the Armenian genocide on 4/24, but celebrate our culture and such. We were not decimated at the same time. Great quote about it in the movie about it with Christian Bale. Okay, I got to check the movie out. I appreciate that. Pete, if you're not invited, you're not cool. Sorry. I love you, Pete. People probably don't want to hear about the dead again. I'm teasing. I love you, Pete. You know that. Yes. The younger generation needs to know history so it doesn't repeat it. I agree completely with that, Ben. I think you're exactly right. That's my reason why I think we need to keep talking about it. And again, not every day. It's not part of, I don't wake up in the morning and go, hi, look in the mirror. Hi, descendant of slaves. I don't do that. But do I recognize it? Of course, as you should. And I'm sure Adrian doesn't every day go, I'm a descendant of people who were part of genocide. I'm sure she doesn't do that. But it's part of her culture and part of who she is. And if we don't look at history doesn't actually repeat. It rhymes, as they say. And I agree with that. Similar things happen again and again. And it always seems like it's okay until it's you, right? Until it's you. Then it's a problem. Until it's yours, people you love, you care about. Then it's not so good. So I agree, Ben. We do want to talk about history. Absolutely. And I don't think we want to sugarcoat it. I also don't think that we want to blame everybody currently for it, right? I don't want to blame the Turk alive today for the genocide of 100 years ago. Do I want to recognize that it was Turks who did it? Yes. Do I recognize that? Do I want the government to recognize that? Yes, I do. But I don't want to blame the individual Turk today who's growing up, who's 17 years old and was nowhere near there. I don't want to blame that individual, but I do want to recognize what happened. Absolutely. So I hope that was clear. So speaking of Black history or Jewish history, etc., you are going to regulate their history to a month? Oh, yes. I agree with Morgan Freeman. It's American history. It is, right? I do agree. And by the way, Black history got the shortest month. See that, Tommy? Morgan Freeman was right. I'm teasing. But no, it is American history. The problem that we have, and this is an issue that we've been very bad at this as Americans. Our history traditionally has been only the history traditionally of the white male in our history books, which I'm not against white males, as you know, and white males have done many great things in America, but we really didn't in the past add the other aspects of people who were doing things, right? For most of American history, the vast majority of Americans were white, of European descendants, and most of the people in charge were men. That's true. So obviously most of the things were going to be done by white males. Okay. But we didn't add the other things. We hardly did at all. If you see history books in the 40s and 50s and 60s and 70s, I mean, nothing. So now we've tried to overcompensate to show that others were also part of this nation. And I actually like that idea. The problem is, how do we then begin to just mix them all together to make it American history, right? How do we come to a place where we don't need African American studies, right? How do we get there? We don't need women's studies. How do we get there? I'm not sure we're there. I don't know. I haven't checked what's going on now. I don't really know. I don't have an opinion on that. But I do know that I want to get to that point, Tommy. I want to get to where it's just American history. And everybody who was there was represented fairly there. Is it still going to be dominated by white males? Yes, because that's what was happening then. But we literally, back in the day, again, I went to school many years ago. Back in the day, it really was just white male history. That's what it was. So how do we make that shift now to become female history too, non-white history also, to make it American history? I think the goal is exactly correct. I think Morgan Freeman's goal is correct. I don't know if we're there, to be fair with you. I don't know. So, no, we should speak about the fact it's a lie and being human matters. What? No, we should speak about the fact it's a lie and being human matters more. No such thing as African Americans. Stop it. We are Moors. Oh, you're saying that, we're Moors. Oh, is that? Weren't Moors more North Africans? Is that right? See, here I'm a little bit ignorant to this, to be forward with you. I'm pretty sure that Moors were North Africans and that most slaves brought here, the vast majority, were Sub-Saharan Africans, coming from mostly Western Africa and some from South Africa. So I'm not sure that the descendants of slaves were Moors. They're African Americans without question. Moors are African Americans. That's true. I'm not sure that I wouldn't consider them descendants of slaves. If anything, Moors are part of the slave trade, if I understand the history right. So I'm unsure where you are in that place. I'm happy to, if you want to, do it again. I'm happy to bring up more of that. How can we as libertarians do better outreach to the African American community? It seems the left focuses a lot on slavery, Jim Crow, and the war on drugs with a lot of social justice messaging. This is a great, yes, Mr. Buckshots, yes. Libertarians tend to focus on rights and things like states' rights and our rights. And the problem is, if you're Black, what you hear when people say that, what you hear is, oh, your right to discriminate against me. Oh, states' rights used for slavery. That's not what you're saying. I want to be clear. I get that's not what you're saying. What I'm saying is that's what a lot of the Black community will hear. So you're right. We have to change our rhetoric to be more, to not trigger, right? To be the right things, like focusing on, poverty, right? And I talk about that. It's about let's fix poverty. The Black community hears that. So when I say here are policies to alleviate poverty, to create an ownership mentality in Black and brown and poor communities. When you start doing that, I think then they begin to hear it, right? Then they begin to hear it. And the reason they'll hear it is the Democrats actually aren't talking about any of those things. They're talking only about it's wrong, we'll have more government programs. That's all they're talking about, not real solutions. Republicans are ignoring it because why bother? They can't get the Black vote anyway. Also, they thought. And I think Trump showed them that it's not necessarily true. You can get a chunk of the Black vote, Republicans, if you're listening. You can if you begin to do better outreach. And libertarians, we can if we do better outreach. That's really the issue. So you're right. We aren't that great at it. And it's not our policies. Libertarian policies, without question, help the Black community. But man, they don't sound good. They're not, words that connect and match. So I think that's it. We should hear more about Black Wall Street and the greatness of Black culture than I was focusing so much on evil's negativity. Yes, yes, and yes. And for those of you who care about that, my show last year on June 19th, on Juneteenth, was all about that. Check that out. I discussed exactly. You are correct. Black Wall Street. The movie. How old was that movie? 10 years more. The Pursuit of Happiness with the Y, happiness. Will Smith's in it, talking about guy coming from homelessness to becoming a Wall Street banker. These are very nice stories of success. Absolutely, I agree completely. Yes. We should not erase history, either good or bad. It's important. I'm with you, right? I completely agree with you. Yes, we should not. The most honorable Messiah, Marcus Garvey, came noble, Drew Ali, and race and slavery are fake and need proof, just ask. So race is fake and slavery is fake? If your argument that race is fake, meaning that it's much more of that people aren't naturally racist and we're more tribal and we've kind of made a way by skin color to be tribal against each other, I could buy that argument. There's an argument for that, and maybe that's correct. To say slavery is fake, okay. I'm asking for proof on that one. I'm not seeing that as true. There's just so much insane evidence slavery not being fake. You'd have a really hard time proving that to me. I'm not sure I even want to walk down that hole. So, but thank you. I'm open to talk. I'm totally open to talk. The race thing, okay, I can talk. The slavery thing, I'll still talk, but that's going to be that's a tough road for me to go down. So, to me, it seems the LP tried to take a leftward approach by embracing social justice messaging and BLM. It also seemed to turn a lot of right-wing libertarians during 2020. How can we do better? I think that was actually normal, right? A lot of people were upset that the LP kind of shifted left. Remember, the LP The Libertarian Party is by default the party that is anti-establishment. Who was the president? Republican, right? Trump was the president for 4 years. By default, the party is going to be anti-Trump because they're anti-Trump. The party was anti-Obama when Obama was president. The party will be anti-Biden now that Biden's president. So the party tends to lean the opposite of whoever's in charge. That's normal. I think you're going to see the party kind of shift a little bit right now because Biden's president. So of course you should the left. We're anti-establishment. If you look at New York State, blue state, New York State libertarians lean right. Oklahoma, red state, they lean left. Doesn't mean that everyone in the party's left or right. Doesn't mean that. It means that we tend to get more people from that side. It's not 100% rule. We tend to get more, that side, because if Trump's the president and you lean right, well, your guys there. What do you need libertarians for? Right? So you will get less of them when Trump is president, and we'll probably get less Democrats, sadly, when Biden's president. I like to get more of everybody. So I do think it's kind of the thing, but generally speaking, I want us to not just say the other guys are bad. I don't want us to just embrace their rhetoric. I want us to create our own rhetoric and our own policies. That's the answer, Mr. Buckshots. Our own policies that they don't have, like regulate like onions. Yeah, I'm pointing my finger at everybody else because I pointed at myself first. When I ran for office, I had policies and rhetoric that was libertarian, right? Leasing out naming rights for bridges, right? So we can pay for infrastructure. That was libertarian ideals, libertarian ideas. That's what I think we want. So I hope that was clear. So Brenda Ware, Horton, Larry Sharpe is a very smart. Thank you, Nick. I appreciate that. Absolutely. Yes. My grandmother on my mom's side was Armenian, but she was gone before I was born, so I got no stories. Oh, that's too bad. The stories are the things that keep us going. Too bad. So, well, maybe you can call some of your Armenian friends now here. Call Adrienne. Maybe tell you some stories. It's not bad. We can try that if you want to. Yes. So, there we go. Bingo. I hope there's an Armenian community that you can tap into. Yes, absolutely. Yes. So, I hate the PC police wanting to discredit the contributions of our nation's founders because some had slaves. I say the same thing always on this, Josh, right? I think we want to judge people by their peers, by their contemporaries, right? If we don't do that, if we judge people by today's standards, can you respect anybody prior to like 1980? I don't know. I mean, I guess everybody prior to 1980 is evil. I mean, how can you put the standards that we have now on anybody from, far in the past? I don't know if you can. You have to, look at them by their contemporaries, by their peer group, right? I think you have to. Otherwise, it's not fair to them. I mean, I don't even want to judge myself from myself 40 years ago. The things I thought and said. I just said some things, and I admitted to you some things I said as a kid that didn't really make much sense. But I was a kid, and I was ignorant, and I said these things. So I would hope you would have judged me by other 11-year-olds of my peer group, not me today. So I do think we shouldn't just discredit. And again, we should say it, right? People have asked me before, who was my favorite president? And I will almost always say George Washington. And they said, why? He was a slave owner. He was absolutely a slave owner, and that's a horrible thing about him. And I'm never going to say that was a good thing. That was a terrible thing. And he didn't even free his slaves upon his death. Even worse. That's terrible. And he was literally the only man in that time from ever to just walk away from power, to create a peaceful transition of power. He could have said, no, I'm staying president. There would have been a minor civil war, and he probably would have won. He stayed president if he wanted to. He could have, or declared himself king. There would have been a minor civil war. He probably would have won because he ran the military, and they all respected him. He probably would have won, and he would have been king, and we'd have a Washington dynasty. That could have happened if he wanted to. And a whole lot of people of his time would have done exactly that. And he didn't. So do I take away that amazing thing that he did because he owned slaves? I don't. If he owned slaves today, yes. 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 Then I don't. I don't. And it's possible that he owned my ancestors. Literally, that's possible. He may have owned my ancestors. That may be true. I am a descendant of slaves. He may have owned my ancestors. And I'm still not going to take that away from him because I judge him by his peer group, not by today's standards. At the same time, I think we can give credit where credit is due. I do today all the time, right? AOC, very different than slavery, but just conceptually, AOC is my congressperson. She is. And I give her credit where credit is due. She busted her rump to get this seat. She worked hard, knocking on all the doors. Her team knocked on my door, right? I mean, she worked for this thing. I give her credit for that. I do. I give her credit for being against the new war on domestic terrorism. I give her credit for that. Didn't vote for her. Not going to vote for her. But I can still give her credit where credit is due. And I think we can give everybody who did great things in the past credit as long as we're judging them based upon their peer group. So thank you for that. Yes. All right. Does the education of African enslavement help perpetuate the idea of racism? We don't focus education on the slavery of any other ethnic group, which existed. Democrats have been removing statues and names of schools and buildings to erase that history. And that's understandable from a certain viewpoint. And it shouldn't that same ideology be then added to the education of African slavery? Then we can create a generation that doesn't have these thoughts that could create fear and hate and violence. I get where you're going with that, Matthew. There is a difference. The slavery, the enslavement of Africans in America was a huge part of America. The minor slavery that happened of other races in America was minor and short-lived and also wasn't based upon race. It was based upon agreements or things they've done. It wasn't based upon race, right? The way they indentured the servants of Irish and other people wasn't, you weren't a slave because you were Irish and then your children then became slaves. That's not how it worked. It did work that way with blacks. You were a slave because you were black. In fact, in certain states in the South prior to the Civil War, if you were free black man, but you lived in a state for X number of days or months, you became a slave. That didn't happen with any other race at all. That did not exist for any other race group of people. So there was a special piece here that was different than all other pieces. So, and the South agriculture was literally built on the backs of black slavery. That didn't happen with any other people who came to America, not even Native Americans, as they were hardly enslaved relatively by North Americans. In South America, many of them were, but in North America, hardly at all. The Native Americans were rarely enslaved in any massive amount, right? So it rarely happened. I think that does make a difference in that regard. And I think the concept, does it perpetuate racism? Maybe. There could be an argument for that. Maybe. Are you saying that if we talk about the slavery and how it was based upon race, does that story then get people to think, well, they must have deserved it? Is that where you're going? Or something like that? I mean, maybe, but I don't feel it, right? When I see most of my friends who aren't black seeing things or watching things about slavery, most of them are upset by it. I don't remember any of them going, they deserved it, or they're worse, or good for them. I mean, I guess maybe they wouldn't tell me. It's possible if anyone did think that, maybe they'd be hiding it. But if they thought that, they already thought that, right? The discussing it didn't make them all of a sudden go, oh, now I'm racist. I don't think so. So my gut would say no. My gut would say talking about slavery and showing it does make the average person feel the horror of it, not want to make it ever happen again, feel bad about it. I don't see the harm in that. The knocking down statues, the difference in the statue issue is the state shouldn't put those statues up at all, right? You want those statues, put them in your house, put them in a museum, put them on your front lawn. I mean, I wouldn't like it, but it's your front lawn, do what you want. Those statues were made for the same reason we talked about the history books. They were made to say, even though we lost the war, white history is the right history. You don't see the opposite, right? If you go to those states, you don't see, a statue of, say, I don't know, Nat Turner, right? Nat Turner. You don't see a statue of Nat Turner. if that makes any sense. Because you know the slave bill. You don't see a statue of Rosa Parks, right? You don't see those things. Oh, you didn't see those things, right? You might now, but you didn't. But how about no one puts up statues unless you want it? You pay for it yourself, your own museum, your own place, statues wherever you want. How about that? So I don't think it does. I don't at all. So I don't agree that whites should pay in reparations, especially via government taxation. None of my family was here during slavery. Well, I think you have the same issue, right? The idea of reparations. Is reparations a savvy thing, a right thing, or not a right thing? It's an issue that people talk about often during Black History Month, but throughout the year. Of course you wouldn't think that. I get it. Right. I don't blame you either. Right. And who knows? Right. A lot of people in America today, their families are immigrants. So many of the people today weren't around during slavery at all. Their families weren't around during slavery at all. Many of them weren't. It's true. So but the concept is, well, you're benefiting from that, so you should pay for it. That's the concept. The issue is now America is only about 65%, I think, 60% white now. So now you're saying that 60% of Americans benefit from something and the other 40% now also have to pay. So it does, I get your point. It does seem unfair, but I'm just saying you understand the argument. If you've heard what I've talked about for reparations, I've talked about a policy that doesn't force anyone to actually pay. It instead encourages an ownership mentality in the Black community, particularly those descendants of slaves, and it encourages segregation. It encourages integration without forcing it. We're still very segregated in our neighborhoods, our schools, particularly in New York. And it encourages property ownership and business ownership at the highest level. And if you remember, my idea for reparations was the biggest problem with Black families after slavery and during slavery, obviously, is that there was no way to transfer wealth. There was no wealth gathered that you could transfer into your family. It didn't happen. So therefore, that culture of ownership also began to go away. Many people who've come here from other countries, particularly those, who are poor immigrants, the first thing you want to do was gather assets, right? It's a very common thing. Work hard to buy a house. Work hard to buy a business. Work hard to buy land. Work hard to buy something. You have assets that your family can grow from. That's a common theme in many, many immigrant families. It's a common theme for the American dream. That dream was physically halted in the Black community, as someone mentioned about Black Wall Street. As the Black community began to grow, it was literally attacked by government forces. Leadership killed. I'm not making this up. Leadership killed. Facilities and houses burned to the ground. That didn't happen in the Irish American community, in the Italian American community, in the Jewish American community. And of course, all of these communities had to deal with horrible discrimination, had to deal with all kinds of problems, and they did. I mean, kudos to those communities. I mean, look at our Supreme Court, filled with, Irish and Italian and Jewish family, Irish American, people who are from immigrant class. Brilliant. Kudos to them for moving past all of that. Awesome. The one that they didn't have to deal with was 150 years of state government sponsored violence against them that it didn't have to deal with. So that means the government did all these issues, these problems with them directly, right? The government stopping Black people from being in housing projects that were white. Literally, their guidelines said you can have up to 30% if you're either, it was, if I remember right, Irish, Italian, or Jewish, 0% Black. Zero. The federal government guidelines said that. No Blacks, none. So that type of thing, and this is the 50s and 60s, right? Those types of things are government sponsored. So the government has to do something in return, right? So my goal, my whole plan was anytime a Black family descendant of slaves wants to transfer wealth from themselves to any other family member, that is done for free, regardless if there is a tax or a fee, does not matter. It is free. You can transfer wealth within your family for free for a specific period of time. And I was thinking that time is 23 years because that's about what a generation is. So for 23 years, if you are a descendant of slaves, you may transfer your wealth as much as you want, wherever you want, if it's in your family, who are also descendants of slaves, free of charge, regardless of any fee or any taxation. You don't pay that period. You get to transfer your wealth as you see fit. Second piece, any property or business taxes in any state, regardless, no matter what, half if it is owned 51% or more by descendants of slaves. Half. If 51% or more, your taxation's half. Now, of course, someone says, well, then taxes go up. Not necessarily. Because first off, only 13% of the population is black anyway, so it's a small percentage. And how many will be buying that? Small percentage, right? And then how many are eligible? Again, smaller and smaller. And how much is property tax compared to our entire tax burden? But what should happen, if my economics are correct, that will spur a whole lot of new buying. Why? Because, Brian, you decide you want to start a business. Well, when you start this business, if it's 51% owned by descendants of slaves, you're paying half tax. First thing you're going to think of is, where are my black friends? That's what I want. And now, even at the highest levels, you're in New York City going to buy a building, whatever, the building's $10 billion, whatever the cost of the building is. A lot of tax in that building. What am I thinking now? Where are my black friends? Yeah, I'm going to try my best to make that happen so I have an advantage, giving a market advantage to people who are able to do joint deals with descendants of slaves. Now, what happens? They learn the business, then it's how things happen. They get into the right places. That happens. But say you don't care. Look, I own my building. I don't care about the taxes. I don't care about black people. Fine. Run your business, man. No one's forced you to do anything. And it's a specific amount of time. Now, as that begins to happen, what happens in the black community? They begin to have, without question, an ownership mindset, which makes all of them better. We integrate naturally without force. We learn the top networking skills. It becomes part of them already. We can transfer wealth. We learn that concept of transferring wealth to our people. And by the time 23 years is over, are the people of America going to want to raise that tax rate again? Of course not. Are the people of America going to already be thinking about trying to lower that tax rate over 23 years to get to that level anyway? Aren't they? Yes. So the end of those 23 years, it's going to be a massive cut in property tax and business tax. Thanks to who? The African American community. So what do all the other people say? Thanks, black people. You lowered our taxes. You're the best. That's what I want. I think that style, and maybe we change the specifics, but that style of reparations to me seems to make the best of both worlds. You gain something, you pay it back without punishing people who don't want to be punished. You encourage integration without forcing it, and you gain a community of people to give them, to encourage an ownership mindset in a group of people that will support them for the generations afterwards. So hope that was clear. So. All right. What's your take on the Black Lives Matter agenda to be taught during Black History Month? I'm not sure what that is, actually, Charles. I'm not really sure what that is. I don't know if I can answer that question. I know that the organization Black Lives Matters is much more of a socialist organization. I don't know. I would assume if it's teaching that, that's something I would be against. I'm assuming, but I actually don't know what that is. I wish I could give you the answer. I'm actually not sure. It's not my thing. Not my thing. I want to localize school like there's no tomorrow. So if in your school you think it's appropriate, you should. That's what I would say. In today's society, I feel like productive conversations about these types of subjects are being lost because people are too afraid. Yes. How do we get past that, in your opinion? I think it's exactly what I said. We just talk more and talk more, just like this. We just talk about it. I'm not mad. I'm not trying to get you to think that I'm, you got to feel sorry for me. I'm not doing that. Not who I am. Never did. Wayne, you knew me in the Marine Corps. I was never that way. I was never like, you got to do this because I'm black. I was never that way. I wasn't then. I'm not now. Right? I wasn't then. I'm not now. I'm trying to move my way through. Wayne, by the way, it was we served together back in the 80s in the Marine Corps. So, I mean, he knows me from then. I wasn't that way then. And I'm still not that way. I think we have to have conversations. I had those conversations back then about gender, race, whatever. I didn't care. We have to have those conversations constantly. The more we have it, the more it becomes okay. Not be angry. Right? Brian says he doesn't want whites to pay. I'm not mad at him for that. I understand it. Let's talk about it. It's fine. Let's have a conversation. Absolutely. So, the Moors sold them. I thought that's true, Stephen. I thought Moors were part of the slave trade and selling. My history may be off on this, but I believe that was true. North Africans were actually part of the slave traders who were in the slave trade. I think that's correct. And the monopoly of government schools, then people decide on the history they'd like to teach their own schools, no centrally mandated white or black history. I think it's not a bad idea, right? I think as long as we are transparent, and that's all I care about, transparent so parents know what their kids are being taught, transparent so the people around know what's being taught. I'm not against that idea, right? I think the closer we get to that, we're not going to get exactly there, but the closer we get to that, the better it is, Craig. I completely agree. Yes. Where's Irish History Month, Caucasian History Month? I definitely want Black history we talked about, but giving on group a month and not others leaves some people alienated. This is a very a big point, Jimmy, and there is a level that we have to be concerned about. Now, why would you not do Irish History Month or Caucasian History Month? Because traditionally, that's what history's been, right? To my point earlier, if you look at the textbooks from the 70s, 60s, 50s, the vast majority of them were just white males. That was the entire history. That was what it was. So the goal of this was to kind of, say, hey, there's other histories. I want us to get to a point where, like Tommy said, right, to at one point where it's not required, where it's all American history, right? That's what I want. I don't know if we're there yet, but I'd like us to get there without question. But the goal was to say, look, there's other history, right? The amount of people, one of the best parts about last year in George Floyd, is as much as it's horrible that he died, number of people who I knew who didn't know what Juneteenth was. Right? That should be the goal of Black history. A number of people didn't know what Black Wall Street was. I mean, people didn't know that. You should, right? You should know that's what happened in history. So I think that's the reason why. I don't want to perpetuate even more boxes, because then when is there Irish American history and then Armenian American history and then do we keep going? I'd rather not do that. I'd rather keep the ones we have, integrated effectively until we don't feel like we need it anymore. I want us to feel like we don't need it anymore. That's what I want, Jimmy, because you're right. As we harp on this a lot, and there's the other side, I guess to Wayne's point, right? I want us to have these conversations, but I don't want it to be every single day or even every week. Because if we harp on it, then what happens? People begin to feel alienated. I mean, look, if you're a white guy and you hear someone talk about Black History Month, my assumption is you go, okay, good for you, and go about your business. That's my assumption. Maybe I'm wrong. You can tell me if I'm wrong on that. You go, yeah, good. All right, you move on. You do your stuff. But if you heard every week, every month, black, black, brown, brown, black, black, brown, brown, eventually they go, what you just said, what about me? At one point, you start alienating. And I think that's currently what's been happening with a lot of the Democrats currently. Every single policy has been, here's a policy, and we're going to focus on Black and brown communities. Here's a policy, and we're going to focus on Black and brown communities, versus just here's policy and move on. And I think white males are starting to feel more and more alienated. And I get that. I understand that. I think you have a valid point, Jimmy. I'd like us to find that middle ground of saying, hey, it wasn't here. Here it is in February. Can we talk about it? Let's learn some new stuff, and then let's move on. Right? I think that's what we have to do. We're not finding a good balance. We're not. We're either just ignoring it or we're shoving it down people's throats. And I think we have to find a better balance. We're not good at it, Jimmy. That's the answer. We're not good at it. So exactly, many Turkish friends. Yes, right, exactly. Thank you. We're on the same page there. I appreciate that. Cancel culture is making discussions like this harder. Oh, Matt, you are so right. This goes to Wayne's point. You are so right. Yes, makes it harder. Too many people would rather condemn people for lack of knowledge and label them something shameful than teach each other better their neighbor and better their neighbor to create real connections in their communities. Yes, absolutely. Yes, right. My Jewish friend didn't get mad at me. I mean, we're kids, but he didn't get mad at me. He's like, no, let me talk to you. And I'm like, yeah, okay, let me talk to you. And we had a conversation and we began to understand each other better because we had a conversation. He didn't go, you don't want to talk about the Holocaust? You must be a Holocaust denier, and you must be a terrible person. I can never talk to you again. No, I just didn't get it. Literally, I just didn't get it. And then he talked to me. And I still don't 100% get it. I can't, right? I'm not Jewish. I can never get the full impact of that. Of course I can't. But can I get it on an intellectual level? Of course. And we all can. Yes. So it is a problem. I want us to connect more. And it's why I do it. And don't you know that whenever I do this, I risk someone calling me, not black enough, too black, don't talk about this, don't. Oh, I risk it every time. And I still do it. Someone's got to. So I do. Yes. I find it disingenuous when people claim to be upset about no White History Month and ignore those months when they actually occur. By the way, Italian History Month is October. Look at that, Aaron. There is an Italian History Month, October. See that? It does happen. There you go. Italian History Month. I love that. I love that. Yes. I don't accept that I benefit just because of my skin color. That thought pattern keeps any of the skin color in the mindset of still being a victim. This is a tough one for me, Brian. It's tough because I remember talking to a close friend of mine, and this is based upon a real conversation we had together about the idea of his whiteness. This is 20 years ago. And we were talking. And I said, I don't think that a white guy gets up in the morning and goes, I'm so happy I'm white. La, la, la. I don't believe that at all. I mean, I guess maybe some racist, crazy guy does. But I think the average white guy just goes to work every day or does his own thing. He doesn't think about his whiteness. I don't think he does. I would hope black people don't think about their blackness. Hope they don't think about it when they wake up in the morning. I would hope not. I don't. But I do think, when I talked to him about it, I asked that question. He's like, no, I don't. You're right. But he said something. He was very funny. He said, but Larry, I wouldn't give up my whiteness. Not in this country. I wouldn't do it. And Chris Rock did a joke on this. He said, white people don't want to be me, and I'm rich. So I think there is something to having a benefit of skin color based upon where you are. And it's not because you're white, it's because of where you are, right? I mean, if you're not Jewish in Israel, it's probably a problem, right? I mean, you probably have disadvantage. I don't know. I've never been to Israel, but that's my assumption, right? If you're not whatever is the majority of people, you're going to have a problem. And in America, white's the majority. So I think you do have an advantage because you are the majority, whatever that is. And maybe it does keep me in the mindset of a victim, and I hope not. That was my entire point, right? Is to look at it and say, no, I don't want to be the victim. I want to gain respect for being able to get above that. I want to gain respect for moving past that, I think. So again, just my view. You were trade with Chris Rock. I love it. I think that's great. This, by the way, is from a show probably 15 years ago, so I don't know if things have changed. But yeah, it's a great point. Yes, it's a great point. Maybe some people would. Yes. So in any case, let's see if I can keep going here. Good, bad, or indifferent. Why can't we just have everything called American history? I think that should be our goal. I think the future, it is our goal. Yes. How do we discuss the difference between systematic racism, government policy, and social racism, ignorance, and misinformation when the left can try to push everything in the same box? Man, Kenneth, you are on the money. Yes, they are different. Right? They're different. They absolutely are. They're totally different and dealt with differently. Right? I say this all the time. The average person, humans in general, we aren't racist naturally. We are tribal naturally. We have to be told that our tribe doesn't include people of this race or color group. Do you think, and we're talking about Jewish history, do you think the average German born in 1920, when they were born, when she was born, she was born and said, oh boy, I hate Jews? Of course not. She was born a kid and didn't care. But over the course of her lifetime, she was told stories about the bad Jewish person and how they're bad and evil. And then when they went into camps, she was like, they're bad anyway. That's what she was taught, that, right? She didn't believe that. If she was never taught that, and all of a sudden you said, we're going to put some people in a camp, she'd be like, no, why are you putting people in camp? You can't do that. What are you doing? Of course she would have said that. But she was taught as she got older. And eventually she was like, whatever. That's what happened. And I think that also happens. That's the ignorance and misinformation you're talking about. That's social, right? But also the systems do change. And then either the stories validate the system or the system validates the story. So absolutely. I completely agree. Guys, I am going to have to run. I'm about to jump on my cool Clubhouse. 8 p.m. tonight. If you are on Clubhouse, you got to get on. Only the cool kids could be on. This Clubhouse is new to me too. So come on if you can. 8 p.m. Come on in. We're talking about New York City lockdowns, good, bad, or something else. I hope all of you will enjoy the rest of your Black History Month, whatever that might mean to you. Guys, have a great night.